Devin here with Basketmaker atlatl. In this video we're going to make one of these cheap, simple, easy to make darts that you can get all the materials at a hardware store, and they're pretty small, lightweight darts, as Basketmaker darts, prehistoric darts from the Southwest were. As you can tell, it matches pretty closely the dimensions and the flight pretty well of reproductions of darts from the Southwest, like White Dog Cave in Arizona. So, and they balance well with these Basketmaker atlatls. I like to throw them. They work really well. They fly well, and I find them really good for public demos to get a kid started. So let's go ahead and make these darts. The materials that you need are a 4-foot long, 3/8 diameter poplar dowel. This is the main shaft back here. And when you're picking these out, you want to sight down them carefully and look at the grain of the wood and turn it around. Make sure the grain roughly follows the whole length of the dowel, because you'll see occasionally these dowels where the grain's cutting across and it has a tendency to just snap across the grain. And you also want to look for little pin knots in the wood. They'll snap straight across those pin knots as well. So that's the hind shaft, and then the fore shaft is 1/2-inch oak dowel. It's less important to look for grain and knots on these, so you can look for ones that are straight. If the poplar dowels are not straight, I'll show you how to straighten them with the heat gun. So you'll be getting one of these 3-foot long, cutting it into 3 sections of a foot length for the fore shaft, or you could just cut them in half and have a little bit longer dart, especially if you want to make the fore shaft without a archery field point on here. You can make it a little bit longer for that additional weight and just sharpen it at the end, or whatever, maybe glue something on there like a ball if you're giving them to kids. That'll be a little bit safer. And then we're using PEX tubing. This is PEX pipe tubing, 3/8 diameter for the connector. So we'll heat this up, it'll become malleable, and then when it cools, it'll tighten up to form that linkage. For the fletchings, I just use duct tape, 2 pieces of duct tape. It's tough, easy to apply, and it works for the fletching. And I'll use field points. These are glue-on, 125 grain, 11/32 field points. You can use whatever you can get your hands on. And I just use regular hot melt glue to attach them. So let's go ahead and make these darts. Okay, the first step is to carve the nock in the back of the dart. This is what the hook of the atlatl is going to butt up against. So I'm just going to take the tip of my knife, put it right in the center of the dowel, and hold it at an angle and spin the dowel. You don't want this to be very deep. Just going to go down 2 or 3 centimeters, something like that. And you don't necessarily want to take it all the way to the edge of the dowel. These do have a tendency to chip out occasionally. It's not the end of the dart by any means. You can repair it, or sometimes you can just ignore it. And then I'll clean up the sides there with sandpaper. That'll make that nock a little more robust. Now this dowel is pretty crooked, so I'm going to heat it up and straighten it. I'm using a heat gun, which is a fabulous tool. I use it for all sorts of things, and they're not too expensive. And I'm just constantly turning the dowel and moving my source of heat so I don't scorch it. I'm just trying to get it up to where it's a little bit too hot to touch comfortably. And it looks like I just need to do that back here. Now it's straight. Next step, I'm going to carve this down so I can attach a field point. And before I glue on one of these field points, I want to use some denatured alcohol, some rubbing alcohol, and a Q-tip to swab out the interior because it'll oil these to keep them from rusting, and that'll inhibit its ability to be glued on there. The glue won't bond as nicely to the inside. You can see the dark oil that's come out of there. Now, as that's drying out, I'm going to whittle down the end of this thing to meet it. So I'm going to start something like 3-4 inches back and just whittle it, constantly turning it. You'll notice if the grain of this dowel crosses it, your knife will have a tendency to follow the grain. So, maybe challenging the whittle on one side and then your knife will just dive into it on the other side. So just try and make an even taper upwards. It doesn't have to be too pretty. Okay, something like that. And then I'm going to use a rasp. This rasp has a rougher side and then a finer side. Clean it up. Same thing, I'm just constantly rotating it slowly as I rasp off wood. I'm just visually trying to make a smooth taper. Then we'll hit it up with the finer side. Then check the fit. So that fit looks good enough to me. Before I sand this, I'm going to go ahead and glue on that point while it's rough up here. So I'll just use my hot melt glue, if I can find it. There it is. I'm going to hold it together with the dowel. Heat them both simultaneously. Supposedly the heating up the wood helps the glue bond to it. I don't know if that's true. I've just heard that, so I always do it. Get some glue on there, and then we'll put the point on and rotate it as we push it on there. Heat up the point now. And then I'm going to use pliers and rotate it and push it on there. And just let that cool. You can take a rag, damp rag, and try and cool it off faster. Now you want to carve the back of this just at a sharp angle there for the last centimeter or so. This is just so that you can get it to start into that PEX tubing. Not like that. Alright, so now we're going to cut off a piece of this tubing, and we're going to cut it about 4 inches long. So, That's about down here. And to cut it, just take your knife and put pressure, carefully rolling it. Like so. Now we're going to need a pencil. And we're just going to mark this poplar dowel, line it up about halfway, put a mark there so you know where to push the tubing onto. You can't put a mark on the oak dowel because this will spread out and it'll get shorter up here when you push the dowel in, so your mark won't do much for you. Now we're going to heat this up, just this end of it. I'm trying to push it on there. If this tubing gets too hot, it gets really rubbery and it actually just bends instead of being pushed onto the dowel. So you have to get it to the right stage. And you probably want to do this somewhere with this ventilation. I've never noticed any fumes coming off this stuff. But you know, it's probably safer to do it in a ventilated area. For your source of heat, you could also use a kitchen stove. Just make sure you turn on the fan and open the windows by it. Push it on up to the mark. If it won't go all the way, that's fine. That happens to me all the time. I just usually do this in increments. Now we're going to let this cool before we heat up the other side and put in the oak dowel. And when you're pushing these in, just try and keep everything straight. Otherwise the tubing will have a tendency to bend off to the side. Occasionally when that happens it'll split, but it's pretty rare. Usually if it bends dramatically and creases, it's okay. You can just wait for it to cool and then try it again. Push it in until it won't go anymore and you think it's probably seated up. So I've got a good inch at least there over that oak dowel. If you don't have that much, it'll hold it, but they have a tendency to fall out and bend off to the side. But if you got that much up there, it'll stay relatively straight. And if it doesn't, you can heat it up again and straighten it. So now we're just let that cool. Last step is to put on the fletching. So I'll take my duct tape and pull off twice as much as what I want the length of the fletching to be. Cut it off so it's clean rather than tearing it off. And I'm going to take this and put the slick side in, hold it together so it's the same length, and cut. So I've got two pieces the same length. Okay. Now this step can be a little bit aggravating, but you'll get the hang of it. Like I said, a little bit aggravating. Give yourself about 3 inches for the tail for it to engage the dart, or the atlatl, sorry. Put it right in the middle. Same step over here, and try not to have the two sides touch yet. Okay, So we're there. Now we'll bring it together in the middle on both sides. And use scissors to trim up the sticky parts that are sticking out and trim it down into a shape you like. I just do a general taper in. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll take some string. I'm just using linen, fine linen string here. I'm going to cut off an extra piece for a loop end. Story of my life over here. Little kids playing outside, having a blast. Okay. Start your whipping here by just wrapping over the end of the string. And then we're just going to wrap up over the front of the fletching. This will hold the front of that down. As you use it and it gets dirt and water into there, it'll come up in the front. It tends to hold together well in the back. And then to make our whipping, when you get almost to the end here, you'll put that loop in, make a loop, put it in and wrap over it. And then we'll put the end of our thread through the loop. And pull the loop through. That's how you make a whipping. Pretty easy. And then I'll put some glue or something over this. You can use wood glue. I'm going to use this fray check. It soaks into this natural fiber pretty well. And that'll hold it together and help keep it from being abraded as it gets used. And that's it, pretty much. We have a dart now. You can paint this if you want. I just put a coating of linseed oil on there to help them, keep them from getting damp, having moisture soak into the wood. As you use these things, they do have a tendency to warp here along the dowel, but as I showed, it's pretty easy to straighten them. And so that's it. There we have a cheap and easy Basketmaker dart. Thanks for watching.